it's a new day. Hear his word, let us pray. The Sunrise Morning Show. Can't wait to start your day.
It is Thursday, the 30th of January. Let's begin in prayer, a prayer of St. Jerome, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. O Lord, show your mercy to me and gladden my heart. I am like the man on the way to Jericho who was overtaken by robbers, wounded, and left for dead. O Good Samaritan, come to my aid. I am like the sheep that went astray. O Good Shepherd, seek me out and bring me home, in accord with your will. Let me dwell in your house all the days of my life and praise you forever and ever with those who are there. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. It is a better way to start a Thursday, the Sunrise Morning Show here on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. I'm Matt Swaim. Anna Mitchell has news. Paul Lockman at the controls. We're going to talk about Winston Churchill with Stephanie Mann, who gets a little bit into English Catholic history. And Churchill, not a Catholic, but his history still overlaps with the genre of discussions we have with Stephanie. Michael Ortner's got a new book for Word on Fire about Catholic education and building a good Catholic school. Of course, we are still in Catholic Schools Week. We'll check in with Father Robert Nixon, an Australian Benedictine monk. More thoughts on the rule of St. Benedict and the life of a monk. And then pastoral counselor Kevin Prendergast has got some great things to discuss in regard to the epidemic of loneliness. A lot of people have written about this in secular psychology, and there's a lot of value in a lot of that. So what aspects of that psychological wisdom can we as Catholics apply and connect to principles of our faith? We'll discuss that with Kevin here in just a little bit, there at the end of the hour. Right now, it is 2 minutes past. Here's Anna Mitchell with news.
Good morning. At least one citywide prayer vigil is planned in Wichita, Kansas today after last night's mid-air collision between a passenger plane and a military helicopter near Washington, D.C. Audio from an air traffic controller at Reagan National Airport describes how a regional jet collided in midair with that military helicopter. Here's Mark Mayfield.
The air traffic controller can be heard alerting emergency responders that the airliner and the helicopter both ended up in the Potomac River.
It was probably out in the middle of the river. I just saw a fireball and then it was just gone.
She goes on to say it appears the jet and the helicopter collided about a half mile from the runway. This was a regional jet operated by American Airlines. The flight was inbound from Wichita, Kansas when the accident happened near the D.C. area airport. The airline says there were 60 passengers and 4 crew members on board. I'm Mark Mayfield.
U.S. Figure Skating says a group of athletes and coaches were on that flight that crashed into the Potomac. The organization released a statement last night saying a group of young athletes, coaches, and family members were returning from the National Development Camp being held in Wichita. The vigil, announced by the Kansas Aviation Museum, will take place at the Wichita City Council chambers starting at noon Central Time. In other news, President Trump is signing an executive order to prioritize federal funds for expanded school choice programs. The move impacts several departments on a federal level and prioritizes school choice programs through discretionary grants. The order says that within 60 days, the Secretary of Education will provide clarity on how states can use federal formula funds to support K-12 educational choice initiatives. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s first confirmation hearing is over. President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Health and Human Services faced tough questioning about his views on vaccines as well as on abortion. Oregon Democratic Senator Ron Wyden went back and forth with Kennedy over his stance on the measles vaccine. Kennedy has received criticism from Democrats and others for his views on vaccines. He will be back on Capitol Hill for another confirmation hearing. Pope Francis, during his general audience yesterday, prayed for the Democratic Republic of Congo. From Vatican Radio, Devin Watkins reports.
Mentre prego per il pronto ristabilimento della pace e della sicurezza.
As I pray for the swift restoration of peace and security, he said at the general audience, I call on local authorities and the international community to resolve the conflict through peaceful means. He expressed concern for the worsening situation and urged all parties to cease hostilities and safeguard civilians in Goma and surrounding areas. The Pope also brought attention to riots on Tuesday in the capital Kinshasa as protesters stormed embassies of countries they say are complicit in the conflict in North Kivu province.
Quanto accade nella capitale, Kinshasa.
I'm also following with great apprehension the events unfolding in the capital, he said, and I hope that all forms of violence against people and their property will cease. Fighting escalated in Goma in recent days as M23 rebels have fought government forces for control of the capital of the DRC's North Kivu province. The militia, reportedly backed by Rwanda, marched into the city of 2 million people on Monday, marking a dramatic escalation of their decade-long insurgency. M23 seized the airport on Tuesday and has since sought to consolidate its control over Goma. The city's 4 main hospitals have been overwhelmed by hundreds of thousands of injured people seeking treatment. According to the Red Cross, civilians arrived by bus or motorbike bearing bullet or shrapnel wounds. Local church officials have reported shelling of ecclesial infrastructure leading to the death of civilians. On Monday, Bishop Willie Ngumbi Ngengele, the diocesan bishop, said shelling hit the neonatal unit of the church-run hospital, killing several newborn babies. Thousands of Goma residents have fled their homes since Monday, adding to the 1 million displaced persons already in the city. I'm Devin Watkins.
And Pope Francis continued his catechesis series on Christ our Hope at his general audience yesterday, focusing this time on the life of St. Joseph. The Holy Father reflected on Joseph's dream recounted in Scripture, saying he enters into the grace of one who knows how to live the divine promise with faith, hope, and love. And the Pope said he does not express himself with idle words, but with concrete deeds. St. Joseph, pray for us.
Of course, today is January 30th, tomorrow the 31st, which means over the weekend we hit February, which means we're only a month.
Oh, my gosh.
From his month. Well, no, I take that back. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
March devoted to St. Joseph.
No, I was doing my calculations in my head because February is a short month.
Indeed.
So, yeah, about 4 weeks.
Yeah. That's crazy. I feel like the month of January just kind of flew by.
It did, and it was a wild month. A wild month.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad that you're with us here as we wind down the month of January, and that you spend a little time with us the morning of Thursday, the 30th.
It's 8 past. Back with us now on the Sunrise Morning Show is Stephanie Mann from supremacyandsurvival.blogspot.com, the blog named after her book. Good morning, Stephanie.
Mm-hmm. Good morning, Anna.
So we are going to begin a new series with you, looking at significant anniversaries taking place in 2025. And today, we are going to remember the 80th anniversary of the death and state funeral of Winston Churchill. Now, anyone who knows even a little bit about world history will recognize that Churchill was one of the most important world leaders of the entire 20th century. But, Stephanie, for the kiddos out there who may not have gotten this far in history class yet, give us a little summary of his legacy.
Yes. Well, he was born in the 19th century, but until the early, well, especially the mid-20th century, he was an important world figure. He was a soldier, a war correspondent, member of parliament, prime minister of England twice, once 1940, 1945 during World War II, and then in 1951, 1955, an author, an artist, leading England through the Second World War. For good or for ill, you'd have to say. He and FDR and Joseph Stalin reorganized Europe after World War II. And then he gave that famous speech in Fulton, Missouri, talking about the Iron Curtain and Soviet aggression moving through Eastern Europe, which finally fell later in the 20th century. But and he was a great author, a lot of histories, a lot of biographies. Great, of course, he gave great speeches that we remember, never, 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 never give up
Yeah.
and fight them on the beaches, fight them. So he really did have a great impact on the 20th century in
Certainly.
different ways.
Now, your piece on him over at Supremacy and Survival is
Yes.
really, really interesting. I really want to encourage people to go read
Yes.
this whole thing, and we'll talk about as much of it as we can. I have to say,
Sure.
I knew nothing about his religious sensibilities or lack thereof.
Yes.
I suppose
Yes.
it's just not something that people really talk about, given his vast legacy in other ways. But he grew up Anglican, correct?
Yes, he did. He attended Harrow and Oxford, and so later in life, he actually said that he'd been to church so many times when he was at Harrow that he figured he'd done enough for God. And then when he was in India as a soldier, he started reading, and he read very, I guess you'd say, anti-Christian books. Book on rationality and Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which of course always blames the Christians, and other works. And he became convinced that Jesus was not the Son of God and that he was not the Savior. So in other words, although he was baptized as a Christian, he really fell away from, the whole center of Christianity, that Jesus Christ is the incarnate Son of God come to earth and our Savior, died and resurrected and ascended into heaven. And so the fact that he lost that faith as a young adult kind of was balanced by the fact that he kept a faith in kind of some kind of providence of God, particularly for him.
Yeah.
that saved him and kept him going. And so, that just that kind of strange juxtaposition. And so he kind of substituted, instead of being a Christian, as one author said, he substituted a secular belief in historical progress, especially the historical progress of the British Empire and the British. And so
Really
that
interesting.
idea of there's providence,
Wow. So
but not Jesus.
what did he think of Catholicism?
Well, especially in English history, he had the typical, what Newman would have called kind of just the knee-jerk anti-Catholicism. He viewed Catholics as the great enemies of history, especially English history, and I'll say our defeat, a great providential blessing for the English. His history of the English-speaking peoples, I read it when I was writing my book all those years ago, and he really looks at it as a declaration of independence from papal aggression and Henry VIII's breakaway, particularly. Although he was concerned about the number of people that Henry VIII had to kill. But other than that, he thought it was a good thing, and he was glad to see it had happened.
Wow. Okay, so then take us to his funeral.
Well, that's what's interesting is, of course, his funeral was conducted, of course, to the rites of the Book of Common Prayer, the Anglican ritual. It was filled with religion and faith in Jesus Christ. One of the hymns that was sung, or one of the it was included in it, was a Byzantine concatenon of the departed, which is titled "Give Rest, O Christ, to Thy Servants with Thy Saints." So it was definitely a Christian funeral. However, it was also true that his favorite hymns, like "I Vow to Thee, My Country," which really emphasized his patriotism and his love for England, were emphasized. And his wife, his widow, after the funeral, said it wasn't really a funeral; it was a triumph for Churchill. So
Wow.
it's a mixed view that you have to have, and we just, again, not to judge him and say where he is, but we pray for his soul and pray for those who fall into that same trap of not believing in Jesus Christ. That's especially after our baptism.
Right, exactly. And I think earlier I said the 80th anniversary of his death and funeral. It's actually 60 years since his death and funeral this week in history. And I'm just going to conclude with this quote that you have on your blog. "I am ready to meet my maker. Whether my maker is prepared for the great ordeal of meeting me is another matter." May Winston Churchill rest in peace. We've been talking to Stephanie
Amen.
Mann. Stephanie, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, it's 1:15 here on the Sunrise Morning Show, and we're back with headlines right after this. Stay with us.
Are you paying high prices with traditional health insurance that pays for things that violate your conscience? There is an alternative. Solidarity Health Share, a Sunrise Morning Show underwriter, is a community of faithful individuals and families that never share into immoral medical services. Solidarity is not insurance. It's a not-for-profit medical cost-sharing ministry. They offer an alternative way to fund your medical expenses that's ethical, affordable, and more comprehensive. As a member, you choose the doctors you want to see by presenting your Solidarity member ID card. Solidarity allows you to remain faithful to Roman Catholic teachings, and you will never share into immoral medical procedures like abortion, sterilization, or contraception. Memberships start as low as $85 per month for singles and $512 for families. To learn more, 844-313-4999. That's 844-313-4999 or solidarityhealthshare.org.
It's that time of year when you need hot drinks throughout the day and night, so look no further than the Mystic Monks, who sell coffee and tea, regular and decaf.
And you can support our work by earning us a commission on your purchase. Just go first to sunrisemorningshow.com and click the Mystic Monk link at the side of the page.
While you're at our site, be sure to check out our online store where you can purchase Sunrise Morning Show ceramic and travel mugs.
Again, find our online store and link to Mystic Monk Coffee through sonrisemorningshow.com.
Are you a new listener to EWTN Radio? Welcome. We're here for you 24/7.
You'll hear live and interactive shows throughout the day to answer any questions you may have about the Catholic faith.
There's trustworthy news from a Catholic perspective.
And a large selection of podcasts available at EWTN's Podcast Central.
And, of course, the daily Mass, prayers, and everything you need to edify your soul.
Welcome to EWTN Radio. We're blessed to have you with us.
17 past. Here's Anna with headlines.
At least one citywide prayer vigil is planned in Wichita, Kansas today after last night's mid-air collision between a passenger plane coming from Wichita and a military helicopter near Washington, D.C. Pope Francis, during his general audience yesterday, prayed for the Democratic Republic of Congo as rebels have overrun the city of Goma near Rwanda. And President Trump yesterday signed an executive order to prioritize federal funds for expanded school choice programs.
News at the top and bottom of each hour every weekday morning here on the Sunrise Morning Show. A lot going on this week. I was looking at the calendar, and tomorrow we got another Catholic Schools Week Saint too.
Yeah, John Bosco.
Plus it's John Bosco.
Mm-hmm.
We, of course, have been talking about Catholic Schools Week all week long. I don't know what you got going on today. We got Pajama Day in our Catholic school.
Nice.
So
today is a Spirit Wear Day and, like Crazy Hat Day.
Crazy Hat Day.
Because it is the annual Catholic Schools Week trip to the skating rink for our school.
So you need a hat because it'll be chilly inside.
Well, I don't know about that, but no,
Wait,
not
what,
that
what
kind of skating.
What kind of skating?
Roller skating. I think taking a, close to 200 kids to an ice skating rink where you have sharp blades on their feet would be a bad idea.
Now, make no mistake, though, Anna Mitchell. When's the last time you went roller skating?
When I went roller skating, we took Roma. She got roller skates for her birthday a couple of years ago, and we went to a roller skating rink for her birthday.
Okay, so I got
it's
a niece.
It's been a couple of years, but
I got a niece who's had a couple of birthday parties at a specific roller skating rink, and I can roller skate. I can do decent.
Yeah.
I can make it work. But there are some of these kids, man. They're hot dogging out there. They're like cutting they're like Apollo Ono, like coming around the corners, like dragging one foot on the ground, like leaned all the way in, cutting all the way in. And they'll go weaving in and out of you. They'll come back through you skating backwards, and they see like a 40-year-old dude, and they're like, I'm just going to buzz the tower. And I just want to be like negative Ghost Rider, the pattern is full.
Wow.
And they'll come right up on you, and then they don't actually run into you, but you flinch, and then next thing you know, you're in the wall.
Yep. That would be me.
You're in the wall.
Totally. But yeah, pray for Tommy, my first grader, because this will be his first attempt ever at roller skating.
At roller skating?
Yeah.
I could see Tommy either being like really traumatized by roller skating or being really into it.
I know. It's going to be interesting to find out. I can't wait.
There's got to be a patron saint of roller skating. Actually, you know what? I know who should be the patron saint of roller skating. Luigi Guanella was the right-hand man of John Bosco, and he was either beatified or canonized a couple years ago, and the miracle connected with him was a guy who had been rollerblading backwards, hit his head, and had a miraculous recovery after an encounter with a relic of Luigi Guanella.
That's incredible. There you go.
What a
Luigi
segment
Guanella.
tie-up.
Pray for us.
Starting to think outside the box to find new customers. You can reach millions of engaged Catholic listeners by underwriting the Sunrise Morning Show. Each weekday morning, listeners across the U.S. and around the globe can hear your message for your business, ministry, or nonprofit on the Sunrise Morning Show. To find out how it works, email me, Leah at sacredheartradio.com. That's Leah at sacredheartradio.com.
We know you love waking up to the Sunrise Morning Show with a hot cup of Mystic Monk coffee. And if you're looking for decaf options to have something to warm you up at the end of the day, the Mystic Monks have the coffee and tea for you.
And you can earn us a commission that supports the show when you shop after clicking the Mystic Monk link at our site, sunrisemorningshow.com.
Be sure to also check out our online store where you can purchase Sunrise Morning Show ceramic and travel mugs.
Find our swag and link through to Mystic Monk Coffee at sonrisemorningshow.com.
Remember, O most loving heart of Jesus, that they for whom I pray are those for whom you prayed so earnestly the night before your death. These are they to whom you look to continue with you in your sorrows when others forsake you, who share your griefs and have inherited your persecutions according to your word, that the servant is not greater than his Lord. Remember, O heart of Jesus, that they are the objects of the world's hatred and Satan's deadliest snares. Keep them then, O Jesus, in the safe citadel of your sacred heart, and there let them be sanctified in truth. May they be one with you, and one among themselves, and grant that multitudes may be brought through their word to believe in you and love you. Amen.
The Sunrise Morning Show continues. I'm Matt Swaim, joined now by Michael Ortner, who's got a book called The Catholic School Playbook. It's out from Word on Fire. A timely conversation for Catholic Schools Week. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Matt. How are you?
Doing well, and I've been married to a Catholic educator for 20 years now, so when I saw names like Bishop Conley and Ryan Anderson and Dale Ahlquist and Mary Pat Donahue and Jeremy Tate in the front of your book before I even got to the table of contents, I knew that this was a conversation that was going to resonate with me and a whole lot of Catholic educators. So what were you trying to put together?
Yeah, well, we were trying to put together the story of what's happening with Catholic schools across the country right now. So it's been a brutal 6 decades of Catholic schools plummeting in enrollment and closing. But the last 10 or 20 years have seen a real uptick because there are some beautiful schools out there across the country, probably maybe a few hundred of them at this point, that are doing absolutely beautiful things that make education for those children look very, very different than what most of us received. And I wanted to highlight their stories by interviewing them and sharing them with the world.
Yeah, I am so edified by the things that I've seen happening in Catholic education over really the past couple decades, especially the last decade in particular. And it's interesting because I become a massive cheerleader for Catholic education, and I find that when I talk about this, depending on what group I'm in, I find some people, for instance, from the baby boom generation, I'm a Gen Xer, who are like, yeah, I'm not giving my money to Catholic education. I sent my kids to Catholic schools and they lost their faith. And I want to say, listen, it's not like that everywhere, and it's not like that in the way that it was. What are some of the signs of renewal that you've seen?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I'm a Gen Xer as well, and I'm not sure I've met anyone. I'm not sure I've met a Gen Xer who thought they received a great Catholic education, which is a shame. The schools that we're seeing, there are a growing number of school leaders who know how to embrace the Catholic intellectual tradition so that their schools are Catholic both intellectually and spiritually. And I think that is the winning combination for how Catholic schools can truly differentiate themselves from the free public schools that are down the street from them. So, which are, it's hard to beat free and convenient location. So Catholic schools need to really differentiate themselves, and I think that's what we're seeing. So I think you mentioned Mary Pat Donahue at the beginning. So St. Jerome Academy in Hyatt, Maryland, was one of the very first parochial schools to flip to a much more, say, classical liberal arts model. And it went from being on the verge of closing to now being waiting room only and bursting at the seams. And that was over a decade ago when that happened. And now we've got dozens, really hundreds of schools across the country that have followed suit. And it's really beautiful to witness. The kids are, these schools are cultivating children's sense of wonder and helping them fall in love with learning, both their faith as well as everything else on the academic side. So it's really a game changer for all these kids that are out there.
I'll tell you a little challenge that I've noticed over sitting on the sidelines for some of this and, sending a kid to school and picking between high schools. I mean, this is the big challenge for us right now. I have found that so often, if you're looking at three categories, academic excellence, spiritual formation, and administrative professionalism, a lot of times you can get two, but you can't get three, right? This is a challenge with a lot of these schools. Maybe they've got great spiritual formation, great academic excellence, but they don't have great administrative professionalism because it's a bunch of families who just want good Catholic education but don't know how to run a school. Or you get people who know how to run a school really well, know how to be academically excellent, but don't know how to get that spiritual formation plank in the mix. Why is it important that we focus on all of those things if we want our Catholic schools to thrive?
Yeah, that's such an insightful comment. I love your trifecta. It's important because all three build on each other. So let's start with the administrative excellence. You can't. It's impossible to have a great school unless you have a great leader who knows how to recruit and develop great teachers. That is the single most important thing for a school to thrive and succeed, is to hire and develop great teachers, because they are the role models for our children in the classroom and helping them grow in their faith and grow in their overall sense of wonder and fall in love with these different subjects. So if you're not effective in the administration of a school, you're obviously limiting the impact you can have on your kids. And it's one of the biggest problems that we see at Catholic schools across the country, is they're not hiring teachers who are on faith for their spiritual life. And then that dovetails right into the faith side. And when I talk with lots of people who want to see Catholic schools thrive, a lot of them focus in on, and rightfully so, the faith lives of kids. They've seen all the data, and the vast majority of kids who go through Catholic school leave their faith. And so they want to fix that. They want to bring better doctrine, better exposure to the sacraments and all this back to their Catholic schools. So I think that we're seeing that renewal take place on an even wider basis. We're seeing young priests come in and want to fix their schools from a sacramental and religious perspective. And we're seeing that, and I think there's great momentum there. But it's also important for those young priests and school leaders to realize that it can't end there, that it's got to have an impact on what's actually happening in the classroom across all subjects, and that the intellectual life and the spiritual life are integrated and they support each other. So this whole idea of embracing the Catholic intellectual tradition is crucial for it as well. And you need a school leader who gets that and gets all these components.
Well, you cover these components in your book. It's the Catholic School Playbook. You cover everything from the family being the primary educators to what it's like to have a school be a community and not just a place you send your kids, to the finances and business operations, to all of it. And I encourage people to go check it out, the Catholic School Playbook by Michael Ortner with Kimberly Begg. at Word on Fire's website. You can find it linked through the show notes at sunrisemorningshow.com. Michael, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you having me on. Have a great day.
It is 1:30. Here's Anna with news.
Good morning. At least one citywide prayer vigil is planned in Wichita, Kansas today after last night's midair collision between a passenger plane and a military helicopter near Washington, D.C. Audio from an air traffic controller at Reagan National Airport describes how this regional jet collided with the helicopter. Here's Mark Mayfield.
The air traffic controller can be heard alerting emergency responders that the airliner and the helicopter both ended up in the Potomac River.
It was probably out in the middle of the river. I just saw a fireball and then it was just gone.
She goes on to say it appears the jet and the helicopter collided about a half mile from the runway. This was a regional jet operated by American Airlines. The flight was inbound from Wichita, Kansas when the accident happened near the D.C. area airport. The airline says there were 60 passengers and 4 crew members on board. I'm Mark Mayfield.
U.S. Figure Skating says a group of athletes and coaches were on that flight last night. The organization released a statement last night saying a group of young athletes, coaches, and family members were returning from the National Development Camp being held in Wichita. The vigil mentioned earlier, announced by the Kansas Aviation Museum, will take place at Wichita City Council chambers starting at noon Central Time. In other news, President Trump is signing an executive order to prioritize federal funds for expanded school choice programs. The move impacts several departments on a federal level and prioritizes school choice programs through discretionary grants. The order says that within 60 days, the Secretary of Education will provide clarity on how states can use federal formula funds to support K-12 educational choice initiatives. Meanwhile, the U.S. bishops are welcoming President Trump's recent executive order earlier this week protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation, which directs the Department of Health and Human Services and other federal agencies to take action to end the practice of these medical interventions on children identifying as transgender. Bishop Robert Barron released a statement saying, quote, "I welcome the president's executive order prohibiting the promotion and federal funding of procedures that, based on a false understanding of human nature, attempt to change a child's sex. So many young people," he said, "who have been victims of this ideological crusade have profound regrets over its life-altering consequences, such as infertility and lifelong dependence on costly hormone therapies that have significant side effects." He said, "It is unacceptable that our children are encouraged to undergo destructive medical interventions instead of receiving access to authentic and bodily unitive care," end quote. Pope Francis continued his catechesis series on Christ our Hope at his general audience yesterday, focusing on the life of St. Joseph. From Vatican Radio, Deborah Castellano-Lubov reports.
St. Joseph offers a humble and holy example of how to trust and welcome God's plans for us.
Giuseppe si fida.
The Pope recalled how Joseph's role in the fulfillment of God's saving plan was made known to him in a dream, and how, despite some initial doubts, he, with great faith and trust, responds by taking Mary as his wife and making a home for the incarnate Son of God.
Preferisce farsi guidare dalla sapienza divina.
As Joseph sleeps, the Pope recalled that he hears the words, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary, your wife, into your home, for it is through the Holy Spirit that this child has been conceived in her, and that she will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins." Faced with this revelation, the Holy Father recalled that Joseph does not ask for further proof. Rather, he trusts in God. The Pope remembered how Joseph in all of this does not utter a word, but believes. He does not express himself with idle words, but with concrete deeds. Joseph, the Holy Father remembered, trusts in God and obeys. The Holy Father urged faithful to follow his example, to likewise ask the Lord for the grace to dream and be open to God's dreams.
Giuseppe si fida di Dio.
Finally, Pope Francis concluded by inviting everyone to follow the saint's example of welcoming Christ and his plans for us into our lives. I'm Deborah Castellano-Lubov.
That's the news. You're listening to the Sunrise Morning Show. It's 35 minutes past the hour.
The Sunrise Morning Show.
Business owners are starting to think outside the box to find new customers. You can reach millions of engaged Catholic listeners by underwriting the Sunrise Morning Show. Each weekday morning, listeners across the U.S. and around the globe can hear your message for your business, ministry, or nonprofit on the Sunrise Morning Show. To find out how it works, email me, Leah@sacredheartradio.com. That's Leah@sacredheartradio.com.
I'm Father Timothy Shear, and these are Biblical Impressions. The prophet Elijah is known to just about everyone. Just mention his name, and people will probably say, "Oh yes, he's the one who went up to heaven in the fiery chariot." But mention the name of Obadiah, and people will probably draw a blank. Or they may know there is a book by that name in the Bible, but I'm talking about another Obadiah. He was a contemporary of the great prophet Elijah. He was the leader of a kind of resistant movement against the faithless King Ahab. Ahab and Jezebel were determined to eliminate all prophets from Israel. Obadiah, a high-ranking official in the royal court, risked his life to protect 100 prophets, hiding them in remote places somewhere in the kingdom. No small achievement. A drought was on, yet this man was providing for so many at his own expense. In a world so oblivious, even hostile to the things of God, Obadiah stood committed to the preservation of what was holy. He is before our readers' eyes for just 16 verses, but such a brief appearance makes a big impact in the record of the Bible. For Sacred Heart Radio, I'm Father Timothy Shear.
It's 37 minutes past the hour. You're listening to the Sunrise Morning Show on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. We love having you along every single morning. Hope you wake up with us every day. You know, you can set your alarm and have the Sunrise Morning Show wake you up. There's that feature with our app. So go download our app, Sacred Heart Radio app, through sonrisemorningshow.com. Father Robert Nixon joining us now on the Sunrise Morning Show. He's translator of the Tan Resurrection series and a Benedictine monk at New Norcia in Australia. Father, welcome back.
Thank you, Eddie. It's fantastic to be with you today.
It is fantastic to have you. And we are continuing our series on the principles of Benedictine life and how we can apply it in our own lives, whether we're monks or not. And today we're talking about the principle of obedience to our superiors. What does the rule of St. Benedict have to say about this?
So he devotes a whole chapter to the theme of obedience to one's superior, and it also pops up at other points. It's included in the vows we make. It's included in the steps of humility and the tools of good works, which are outlined in the Rule of Benedict. He encourages us to prompt and immediate obedience to our superiors, and this obedience is to be given without grumbling or resentment, either aloud or internally, as much as we can avoid it, and we're to embrace fully the spirit of what we've been asked to do. And this is, Eddie, I have to say, probably the single most challenging aspect of adapting oneself to monastic life. That the poverty, the celibacy, these things can be difficult at the beginning, but after a while they become quite possible and practical. But this obedience is the one thing that tends to remain as a continuous challenge, because it requires a humility and a willingness to step back from one's own opinions. And it's often opinions which we're actually most attached to, even more so than physical goods or other people.
To hear you talk about this principle of obedience to superiors, I kept thinking, oh man, I wish my kids were awake and listening to you right now, Father. I mean, it's very clear how this can be applied to children in family life. I'm the mom in the household. Does this apply to me at all?
Well, yes, Eddie, it does. In fact, I believe that this principle of obedience applies to everyone because there's not only the case of children, but there's the case of wives and husbands. Now, there is part of that is this mutual obedience. And this is very important. Most people also are in a situation where they have superiors over them, either in the church, also in their place of work, and various other situations in life. So there is always that element of obedience there. And even for people who are superiors themselves, there's an aspect of obedience. And this involves listening to the advice of others, to the community as a whole, and being mindful that the ministry of leadership, in fact, is one of listening and then putting into effect. So for everyone, I believe, or virtually everyone, there is this imperative to obedience.
Now, you mentioned that this is probably the most difficult vow to live out on a day-to-day basis over poverty and chastity. And, I've heard this from many priests. They say the same thing, whether they're religious or diocesan, because they vow obedience to their bishop, of course. But I've also heard from these priests that and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Father, that there is a freedom in practicing obedience. Do you find that to be the case?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I believe this is very much the case if you approach it in the right way. So, if you come with a spirit of openness, you say, well, if my opinion is asked on this, or there's a meeting or an appropriate forum, then I will give my opinion. But otherwise, I will embrace what I'm asked to do. And there is a freedom in this, because it means that the responsibility, the determination of what's going to take place is not always within your own hands. And this can be tremendously liberating, because it allows us to open ourselves to the wisdom of others and ultimately to the wisdom of God, because everything ultimately emanates from God. And in the Catholic Church, of course, we believe strongly that God is speaking through our legitimate superiors. And that can sometimes be hard. One of the things St. Gregory the Great said about obedience is it doesn't actually become hard until you disagree with what you are asked to do.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah. Now, what is the role of the superior in this? I hesitate to use the word earn, because I don't know that you necessarily earn obedience. Maybe you do in some instances.
No.
But should
Absolutely.
a superior take his or her position for granted?
No, absolutely not. And, Annie, within the Benedictine order, traditionally people try to avoid election to positions of authority.
I believe it.
And this is because, for one thing, it imposes extra demands and so forth. But, it takes away something of that freedom of obedience to others. Now, the superior, if he takes his role as one of service, then in effect, I think this lays the proper groundwork for everyone to respect his decisions and so forth. We know that he's listened to everyone, that he's made the decision which he believes is best, and so we're prepared to accept that. And I think this is the best approach. It's not so much a matter of earning obedience through merits, because the merit, the ultimately the obedience we give is because of our vows and to God. So yes, but at the same time, the superior, of course, needs to endeavour to be a good example as much as he possibly can, and also to listen, to consult, to be open himself.
Now, Father, I know it's like nighttime for you in Australia right now, but it is in the United States anyway. morning. We're a morning drive time show. So presumably there are quite a number of kids who are sitting in the back seat of the car listening on their way to school right now. I'm wondering, what would you say to any child who might be listening right now?
You know, what I would say to any child, and also to teenagers for this matter, is that your parents have been in this world a lot longer than you have. They've dealt with a lot of more complex situations. They are almost certainly more educated, more knowledgeable, more experienced, and most importantly, they love you very dearly. So whatever they ask you to do is for your own good. To have that trust in your parents, and this will be a tremendous blessing. It will make your life easier. It will show your parents that you love them. So undertake to obey your parents. Think of the child Jesus, who, when he was found in the temple, we're told in the gospel that he was obedient both to Mary and Joseph, even though he was God himself. So I would encourage all children to listen lovingly to your parents and to trust them.
That's how you'll find freedom. Roma, Tommy, Freddie, and Agnes. Just to name a few kids who might be listening right now. We've been talking to Father Robert Nixon. You can find his Tan Resurrection series linked at sunrisemorningshow.com. Father, thank you so much.
Thank you, Annie. God bless you, and God bless all your listeners today.
You as well, Father. Thank you. All right, we got our Catholic counselor, Kevin Prendergast, coming up next. It's 14 till.
Are you looking for peace? Longing for joy? Want to meet the giver of all goodness? God is calling the laity to bring Ignatian prayer into the suffering world. Work for the new evangelization. Go to LordTeachMeToPray.com. Order your free digital training and manual. Find true happiness and everlasting joy. Go to LordTeachMeToPray.com and click on the red button today. It's free. Approved by the USCCB.
Support for the Sunrise Morning Show is from Visiting Angels, helping seniors remain independent and safe in their own home. Visiting Angels compassionate caregivers provide one-on-one essential home care services, including hygiene, meals, light housework, companionship, and more. For short or long-term assistance, even services up to 24 hours a day, Visiting Angels is there. More information is at visitingangels.com. That's visitingangels.com. Franchise opportunities available.
We know you love waking up to the Sunrise Morning Show with a hot cup of Mystic Monk coffee. And if you're looking for decaf options to have something to warm you up at the end of the day, the Mystic Monks have the coffee and tea for you.
And you can earn us a commission that supports the show when you shop after clicking the Mystic Monk link at our site, sunrisemorningshow.com.
Be sure to also check out our online store where you can purchase Sunrise Morning Show ceramic and travel mugs.
Find our swag and link through to Mystic Monk Coffee at sonrisemorningshow.com.
EWTN Radio is growing. Are you an experienced radio producer looking for an opportunity to help forward Mother Angelica's mission of evangelization? We need a passionate, multi-skilled, talented professional who can manage all aspects of producing world-class radio programming. You could be the newest member of the EWTN radio family. If this is you or someone you know, email a resume and cover letter, including salary requirements, to humanresources@ewtn.com.
The Sunrise Morning Show continues. I'm Matt Swaim, and I feel like this is a topic that's uniquely appropriate for this time of year where it's dreary. You can't walk out around the neighborhood like you usually would when it's warm out. It's cold. Days are getting darker earlier. People just want to bundle up and stay inside the house and maybe read the internet. Who knows? But Kevin Prendergast, licensed counselor, former seminary professor, would tell you that just because we live in the most connected age digitally doesn't mean we're actually connected to one another, and loneliness is on the rise. Kevin, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Matt. A couple of hard questions I'll throw out for people and some exercises they can do on their own, okay?
Yeah, let's get started.
Yeah, so, the difference, there's been a lot about isolation and loneliness going all the way back to Bowling Alone like 25 years ago. The Surgeon General's report on loneliness Jonathan Haidt with his book on the anxious generation. So they're all kind of getting at the same theme. And being alone does not mean being lonely. So let's talk about this. I found a great quote looking back at John Steinbeck. One of the characters says, "I never get to talk to nobody. I feel awful lonely. A guy needs somebody to be near him." And it's interesting because I think that there's something in our culture which says, well, maybe I don't really need to see people in person. Virtual reality is all the same. So let's just dive into that. So there's been some trends here in the last 20 years. So the average time that the average American spends alone has increased, so that now Americans are spending 24 more hours a month than 20 years ago alone, right? And during that same time, we're spending about 20 hours less in person with other human beings. And then when we put in the digital piece, that probably about 6 hours a day is spent on media among most Americans, and a third of U.S. adults and a greater percentage of teenagers say that they're online almost constantly, just over the last 5 or 10 years. And then another interesting thing that doesn't seem related to this is I found that in 2023, 3/4 of all restaurant business came from takeout orders.
Yeah, there are a couple things going on with that. Yeah. Man, yeah, you know what? It's interesting that when I talk about hanging out with people, and I think about what I said we should go out and do, 10 years ago compared to today, I used to always say we should go out for coffee somewhere.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And then people
Yeah.
don't really say that kind of thing the same way anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and it matters. So that kind of contact matters. And there's a couple of qualifiers here. So we're all different. We have different personalities. So some people, even listening, are more introverted and reserved. We're not social butterflies. But being connected to other people doesn't mean necessarily that we have to be, social all the time in big groups. One. Second thing is, I think men and women are different, as we have talked about a lot. And so I think a lot of men that I know don't necessarily get into sharing feelings and talking. That's not the biggest thing that helps them to feel connected, but sometimes working on projects together, not just going out and drinking together, but actually working on a service project, St. Vincent de Paul, helping with the parish, helping a neighbor. That doing that together, we may not really have a lot of verbal communication, but there's a deep kind of connection that happens. And the other part here, Matt, is that loneliness is connected to depression, but there's a couple of things. Just because I'm alone doesn't mean I'm lonely, and it doesn't mean I'm depressed. So that there's 3 key questions. There's a big measure that we use, and 3 questions that kind of help to sort that out. Do you feel that you lack companionship? Do you feel often that you're left out of things? Do you often feel that you're isolated from other people? If you answer yes to any of those, or to all 3 of those, or you say that that's happening most of the time, that would be more of a symptom of maybe depression rather than just being alone. And that the other piece here, Matt, is that not only do we have less interpersonal connection, but we also have less solitude. So the fact that, I think we're withdrawing from other people, we're avoiding interpersonal contact. Maybe we're just letting that happen. And the other, I think solitude is necessary to have a good relationship. So the more solid I am, and we know that as Christians, as Catholic Christians, that if I take time alone to pray, to do an examination of conscience, to connect with God, I actually have more to give to other people. If I take that away, if I never have any time where I enjoy being alone and I'm doing something to really look at myself and get to know myself and work through the barriers that are inside, the demons that I have to wrestle with, that actually helps me to be a better spouse, parent, coworker.
Yeah,
so here's
well,
the
and,
exercise.
what people exchange that for is never hanging out with people, but also never being alone because they're constantly sort of consuming social media feeds.
Yeah.
So they're never with people and they're never alone.
Yeah. So if we look at it that way, that kind of gives us a little bit more detail we can dive into. So here's the exercise. It's an old one, but it's very helpful, and this kind of comes from interpersonal psychology, which really would say that we get depressed because we're out of relationship with other people, and we get anxious because we're out of relationship, really deep relationship with other people. So if you just take a sheet of paper and maybe you draw 3, 4, or 5 concentric circles, a smaller one at the middle and then some gradually bigger and bigger to the outside. And the people that are on the very outer limit of those concentric circles are more acquaintances. The people, maybe I know the name of, I have contact with somebody at the grocery store. There's a coworker that I don't, and they're not really friends, but I can be friendly with them. They're acquaintances, or somebody at church. But then to move into the middle. So as we get closer, we've got acquaintances, then we've got friends, people we're friendly with, and we've got closer friends. Then in that inner circle, we've got best friends, the people that I really can count on, the people that have my back. That's usually a smaller circle. It's a smaller group. We don't have 100 best friends. So if we look at that circle, like who on those concentric circles, if I'm really overwhelmed or something, has really thrown me, who do I reach out to? Who's going to be there for me? Who has my back? And then the other part is, if I look at that and I say, well, I don't have anybody in that inner circle. That's a lot of people these days. Or maybe I have one person, but I have all my eggs in one basket. I'm a little bit older, Matt, so this gets more important as we get older, is if we lose people. I was thinking the other day, making kind of a mental list of people that I've been very close to that are no longer with us, that have passed on. And so do I add friends over a period of time? Do I have, if something happens to that one person I have in the middle, I'm going to be, out to sea. So I have to really work at relationships. This takes intentional effort to get away from the computer, to go out, to engage with people, to go to Mass, to talk to people, to be part of group, to be part of service projects. So I got to balance solitude with being with other. And then I can ask God, how do you want me to have that balance in my life, Lord?
Yeah. As you're saying this too, I want to just sort of go through the exercise in my own parish life. Could I go to my parish and find something that could help break me out of this? And on the parish side, do we have the kind of thing that could help somebody who was in this situation and looking for a connection? So great thoughts this morning, Kevin Prendergast. Thanks for listening. We got another full hour coming up on many of these EWTN affiliates.
Arise, it's a new day. Hear his word, let us pray. The Sunrise Morning Show. Can't wait to start your day.
On this Thursday, the 30th of January, let's begin together in prayer in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Your word, O Lord, is spirit and life. For the word of creation, we praise you, O God. Teach us to reverence all that your word has brought into being. For the word of salvation, we praise you, O God. Teach us to work for the salvation of all whom you will to save. For the word of life, we praise you, O God. Teach us to live according to your word. God our Father, you have spoken into the chaos of sin the one all-powerful word of salvation, your Son, our Lord, Jesus Christ. Teach us to put our faith in the constancy of your word and not in the multiplication of our words. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. It is a better way to start a Thursday morning. The Sunrise Morning Show here on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. I'm Matt Swaim. Anna Mitchell has news. Paul Lockman at the controls. And up this hour, lots to get to here on a Thursday. Father Augustine Weta is continuing through our series on his book, Humility Rules. And he's got a great opening prayer to share with us and to unpack this morning. Rita Heichenfeld has got a winter tabbouleh recipe. I always associate tabbouleh with the summer months. It's a great summer kind of like salad and side dish, but she's got a winter tabbouleh recipe that will help you feel, like summer thoughts in the dead of winter. Gary Machuda will join us, and we continue our series on his book, Behind the Bible, What the Bible Assumes You Already Know. And then Courtney Brown will join us at the end of the hour from Rua Woods. So stay with us if you can. Right now it's 2 minutes past. News of service of Central Fabricators and centralfabricators.com. Here's Anna Mitchell.
Good morning. At least one citywide prayer vigil has been planned already in Wichita, Kansas today after last night's mid-air collision between a passenger plane and a military helicopter near Washington, D.C. Audio from an air traffic controller at Reagan National Airport describes how the regional jet collided in midair with that helicopter. Here's Mark Mayfield.
The air traffic controller can be heard alerting emergency responders that the airliner and the helicopter both ended up in the Potomac River.
It was probably out in the middle of the river. I just saw a fireball and then it was just gone.
She goes on to say it appears the jet and the helicopter collided about a half mile from the runway. This was a regional jet operated by American Airlines. The flight was inbound from Wichita, Kansas when the accident happened near the D.C. area airport. The airline says there were 60 passengers and 4 crew members on board. I'm Mark Mayfield.
U.S. Figure Skating says a group of athletes and coaches were on that flight. The organization released a statement last night saying a group of young athletes, coaches, and family members were returning from the National Development Camp being held in Wichita. In other news, President Trump is signing an executive order to prioritize federal funds for expanded school choice programs. The move impacts several departments on a federal level and prioritizes school choice programs through discretionary grants. The order says that within 60 days, the Secretary of Education will provide clarity on how states can use federal formula funds to support K-12 educational choice initiatives. The U.S. bishops have welcomed President Trump's executive order earlier this week protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation, which directs the Department of Health and Human Services and other federal agencies to take action to end the practice of medical interventions on children identifying as transgender. Bishop Robert Barron released a statement saying, quote, "I welcome the president's executive order prohibiting the promotion and federal funding of procedures that, based on a false understanding of human nature, attempt to change a child's sex." He says so many people who have been victims of this ideological crusade have profound regrets over its life-altering consequences, such as infertility and lifelong dependence on costly hormone therapies that have significant side effects. He said it is unacceptable that our children are encouraged to undergo destructive medical interventions instead of receiving access to authentic and bodily unitive care, end quote. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s first confirmation hearing has concluded. President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Health and Human Services faced tough questioning yesterday about his views on vaccines and abortion. He will be back on Capitol Hill as he has another confirmation hearing. Pope Francis, during his general audience yesterday, prayed for the Democratic Republic of Congo. From Vatican Radio, Devin Watkins reports.
Mentre prego per il pronto ristabilimento della pace e della sicurezza.
As I pray for the swift restoration of peace and security, he said at the general audience, I call on local authorities and the international community to resolve the conflict through peaceful means. He expressed concern for the worsening situation and urged all parties to cease hostilities and safeguard civilians in Goma and surrounding areas. The Pope also brought attention to riots on Tuesday in the capital Kinshasa as protesters stormed embassies of countries they say are complicit in the conflict in North Kivu province.
Quanto accade nella capitale, Kinshasa.
I'm also following with great apprehension the events unfolding in the capital, he said, and I hope that all forms of violence against people and their property will cease. Fighting escalated in Goma in recent days as M23 rebels have fought government forces for control of the capital of the DRC's North Kivu province. The militia, reportedly backed by Rwanda, marched into the city of 2 million people on Monday, marking a dramatic escalation of their decade-long insurgency. M23 seized the airport on Tuesday and has since sought to consolidate its control over Goma. The city's 4 main hospitals have been overwhelmed by hundreds of thousands of injured people seeking treatment. According to the Red Cross, civilians arrived by bus or motorbike bearing bullet or shrapnel wounds. Local church officials have reported shelling of ecclesial infrastructure leading to the death of civilians. On Monday, Bishop Willie Ngumbi Ngengele, the diocesan bishop, said shelling hit the neonatal unit of the church-run hospital, killing several newborn babies. Thousands of Goma residents have fled their homes since Monday, adding to the 1 million displaced persons already in the city. I'm Devin Watkins.
And former Patriots head coach and current North Carolina head coach Bill Belichick suggested in a recent podcast that the Super Bowl trophy should be renamed after Tom Brady. The trophy is currently named after Vince Lombardi, the longtime Green Bay Packers head coach who won the first 2 Super Bowls. Belichick, a 6-time Super Bowl champion, listed countless names of players that were part of his winning teams. Brady, though, holds the record for most Super Bowl wins with 7 and is a 5-time Super Bowl MVP.
I don't
Your
think
thoughts,
so.
Matt?
I say no.
I agree.
I'm going to say no.
I'm with you.
There's some Patriots fans out there who are not going to like this, but
Do you really think Patriots fans would
you know,
win
I haven't got
the
an
game
email
after
from a
Brady?
Patriots fan in a long time, Anna Mitchell.
I know.
So I'm feeling pretty confident that I can say no. Vote no on Brady.
We did get we got a kind of a miffed listener from Chicago.
Oh, no.
Because
what did we say about the, was it about the Bears?
No, it was about the Cubs.
About the Cubs? Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna apologize for anything I'm going to say about the Cubs.
Like, sorry, not sorry.
I'm just kidding.
Same with the Cardinals, right?
Oh, was it because we said that the Cubs are playing in Tokyo?
Yeah,
And
I
that
think
I
it was
didn't-
that, and we were like, eh.
Okay, so let me just qualify that. The opening day game between the Cubs and who is it? Like the Dodgers?
I think it's the Dodgers. Yeah.
In Tokyo, which is actually everybody's meeting, pitchers and catchers are reporting early so that they can get in that game at the beginning of the season for opening day in Tokyo. The reason that I was actually upset about that has nothing to do with either the Cubs or the Dodgers, even though they're not my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
My upsetness has to do with opening day should be always and everywhere in Cincinnati,
Ohio.
With the oldest franchise in the league, the Cincinnati Reds.
Absolutely. Amen, Matt.
That's all I have. It's 9 minutes past the hour. The Sunrise Morning Show continues, and I am so excited that we are doing a series on Father Augustine Wetta's book, Humility Rules, because it's just a great book. And humility, I love it so much, perhaps because I don't understand it. Father Wetta, good morning.
Good morning, and I have to confess that I started off with a practicum in humility because, as I think you know, I have Parkinson's, but I take 2 different kinds of pills, one to help me talk more clearly and one to help me sleep better, and they look exactly alike. So I ended up taking 2 sleeping pills right before last week's episode. So if I sounded like someone who had just taken 2 sleeping pills before getting on the radio, that explains it.
Well, in your book, Humility Rules, you have a prayer at the beginning from St. Simeon, the new theologian, and I want to make it clear that this prayer is not the Litany of Humility. I don't know if I've told you this before, but Anna Mitchell has summarily banned me from ever using the Litany of Humility on the air ever again, because every time in the past I've used it, like, equipment breaks, guests' phones don't work. It all happens. It's, I switch out my medication with my toothpaste. Things happen when I pray the Litany of Humility. But you got a prayer from St. Simeon, the new theologian. I wonder if you could share it with us today.
I do. I think you're right. I never pray for humility. I think it just comes whether you like it or not. It's like praying for suffering or something. But yes, we had a brother, Simeon, who actually died last month, so God rest his soul. But he was a great fan of St. Simeon, the new theologian. And it turns out this very hymn that he wrote was quoted in one of JP2's letters, though I can't remember offhand which one. But it perfectly sums up for me, I think, what St. Benedict really meant by humility. And so we'll start like this. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Oh, incidentally, St. Benedict says that a monk should never attempt any good work without praying first. So here we go. Lord, I see the beauty of your grace. I contemplate its radiance, and I reflect its light. I am caught up in its unspeakable splendor. I am drawn outside of myself as I think of myself. What I am, what I have become, oh, what wonder. My eyes are open, for in my own presence I feel such esteem, reverence, even fear, as though I were actually standing before you, Lord. I am bewildered, overwhelmed by this fear. I do not know whether to sit or stand, what to do with these arms and legs that are yours, for what works, what deeds I should use them, these wondrous divine marvels. Grant me to speak and also to do what I say, O my Maker, my Creator, my God. Isn't that wonderful?
It's great. So there are a couple of lines that I wanted to really seize on when I saw this prayer at the beginning of your book. One of them, we'll go from the ridiculous to the sublime. I don't know whether to sit or stand or what to do with these arms and legs which belong to you, or even how to use them. I think sometimes part of our pride is that we assume that we can even control our own bodies, right? And then you wake up one morning and you're like, I don't even remember sleeping funny, but I can't turn my head to the left. Like, we have this sort of like pride and arrogance that we are in control of our own bodies, and we're not even in control of that.
Well, and to acknowledge how wonderful our bodies are, but that they're not even ours really to begin with. I mean, I think of people who are, present company excluded, really proud of the way they look. But the way you look is a complete gift from God, or a complete random assemblage of biological genetic material. It has nothing to do with your talent or your. You didn't practice being beautiful, right?
Yeah, and if you did make yourself beautiful by practice, it's an illusion and a false, right? You covered yourself with a bunch of stuff, right?
And yet, even if you are what people would call ugly, it's still, you're a marvelous creation. Some of my best friends, well, they are my best friends, but some of my favorite saints are the ugliest ones. The ones who were failures in the light of the world's contemplation.
Yeah, and again, how vain all that stuff is and how fleeting. I mean, it doesn't, even if you get really, really ridiculously good looking, it's only going to last for like a few years, right? Because then things creep in and you just got to buy more product.
Yeah, I tell my students, she looks good now, but in 100 years...
Yeah, not so much. Not so much.
None of us will.
Well, let's go to the other thought here, too, because this is the one that I think is really... I mean, you could spend all day thinking about this one. It says, I am drawn outside of myself as I think of myself. So often the tendency is to be drawn into ourselves as we think of ourselves, but humility calls us kind of to be drawn out of ourselves as we think of ourselves, to see ourselves as God sees us, and that's a challenge.
That's right. It gives a whole new spin to the term navel gazing, doesn't it? I mean... You could. I feel like St. Simeon could spend the whole day thinking about how wonderful his navel was, but then it would make him holy doing it, because he'd think, "Thank God for giving me this wonderful little odd thing."
Yeah. Well, but also too, like, I think that there are all these little things that if we step outside of ourselves and we're to see ourselves almost as like a foreign creation, encountering ourselves for the first time. I mean, I wonder how we might think of ourselves rather than just being so used to kind of the routines and the things we take for granted in our own brains about who we are and what makes us.
Yeah, I mean, I never really appreciated my sense of balance until I lost it. But then again, there's so many other things that work on me that I might why waste my time thinking about Parkinson's when I could be thinking about how great my eyes seem to work. Yeah. If you ever feel like you want to be depressed, look at your fingernails and think, gosh, these are incredible. And they work. My fingers work. My nails work. My hair grows. It's all sort of...
See, and that's one you've got on me, by the way.
Wondrous.
So, I mean...
yeah,
the book is called Humility Rules, and we've barely scratched the surface. We've just been in the opening prayer, and I'm really excited to talk about the ladder of humility from St. Benedict with Father Augustine Weta. We've got your book linked at sunrisemorningshow.com. Humility Rules, St. Benedict's 12-step guide to genuine self-esteem. Father Weta, thank you as always. Have a great day.
You too. God bless you.
16 past. We got headlines coming up next.
The Augustine Institute, proud supporter of the Sunrise Morning Show, has a new master's degree in Catholic education and a new non-degree certificate program for teachers and administrators. These programs form men and women who will teach in schools across the country and internationally. Graduates will manifest the knowledge, principles, and practices handed down by the leading educators of our Catholic faith. To learn more about studying on campus or online through the Augustine Institute, visit augustineinstitute.org. That's augustineinstitute.org.
Support for Sacred Heart Radio is from the Comboni Missionaries, serving the poorest and most abandoned people in 41 countries, preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ and preparing local Christian leaders to serve their people, all while helping improve the quality of life with resources like food, clean water, medicine, and schools. Learn more about Comboni Missionaries at combonimissionaries.org. That's combonimissionaries.org.
It's always harder to get out of bed when it's cold outside, so give yourself something to look forward to, like Mystic Monk Coffee for the first cup of the day.
You can find a link to Mystic Monk Coffee at our site, sunrisemorningshow.com, and we earn a commission on anything you buy through that link.
You can also treat yourself to a Sunrise Morning Show mug, which you can buy through our online store.
Check out the mugs and link to Mystic Monk Coffee through sunrisemorningshow.com.
That's sunrisemorningshow.com.
Hi, this is Father Mike Schmitz. Please join me for Ascension's Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year here on EWTN Radio. We're going through the entire Bible and the Catechism in 365 days. If you've ever wanted to understand what it means to be Catholic and allow those truths to shape your life, this is for you.
Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz, tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific on EWTN Radio.
19 past, here's Anna with headlines.
At least one citywide prayer vigil has been planned in Wichita, Kansas today after last night's mid-air collision between a passenger plane coming from Wichita and a military helicopter near Washington, D.C. The U.S. bishops are welcoming President Trump's executive order earlier this week protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation, and President Trump yesterday signed another executive order to prioritize federal funds for expanded school choice programs.
News at the top and bottom of each hour every weekday morning here on the Sunrise Morning Show, and then on Friday nights at 8 Eastern on EWTN Radio and TV. You can catch EWTN News in Depth. It's a weekly one-hour discussion of current events in the church, politics, and culture from a Catholic perspective. The stuff that we're only able to talk about in headline form, EWTN News in Depth can go in depth on. And you get EWTN News in Depth delivered to your email inbox with details on each week's show. Easy way to do that is go to EWTN.com/in-depth and sign up today. There you have it.
There you have it.
It's 21 past. Is it? No, it wasn't 21 past.
No, it's not 21 past.
Oh, man.
Matt, you
Paul,
still
the way
got
that
like 40 seconds.
40
dude.
seconds? Paul dropped the beat on me, and I...
Blame it all on Paul.
What should we say for the next 40 seconds?
How you doing, Matt? Having a good day?
Yeah, you too, Anna Mitchell.
Yeah, it's fine. I still
Don't
have
you
my
hate small
cough.
talk? Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I've been coughing a lot.
Yeah.
Really would like to get over it, but...
How about that weather?
Yeah. It's going to rain here in Cincinnati today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody hates rain.
Mhm.
Well, some people need it.
At least the ice is melting. It's
21
past.
Subscribe to get the Sunrise Morning Show notes. When you subscribe, the show notes arrive in your inbox weekday mornings with the list of featured guests, books, articles, and websites we'll discuss. And then you'll also get the podcast with markers to quickly find and hear an interview again, or to see the Sunrise Morning Show on video. So to know when your favorite guests are on, go to sunrisemorningshow.com and click subscribe.
Business owners are starting to think outside the box to find new customers. You can reach millions of engaged Catholic listeners by underwriting the Sunrise Morning Show. Each weekday morning, listeners across the U.S. and around the globe can hear your message for your business, ministry, or nonprofit on the Sunrise Morning Show. To find out how it works, email me, Leah at sacredheartradio.com. That's Leah at sacredheartradio.com.
A prayer for vocations by our Holy Father, Pope John Paul II. Lord Jesus, as you once called the first disciples to make them fishers of men, let your sweet invitation continue to resound. Give young men and women the grace of responding quickly to your voice. Support our bishops, priests, and consecrated people in their apostolic labor. Grant perseverance to our seminarians and to all those who are carrying out the ideal of a life totally consecrated to your service. Lord, send workers to your harvest, and do not allow humanity to be lost for the lack of pastors, missionaries, and people dedicated to the cause of the gospel. Mary, Mother of the Church, help us to say yes to the Lord, who calls us to cooperate in the divine plan of salvation. For Sacred Heart Radio, this is Father Greg Connerman.
It's time for Bible Foods with Rita Heichenfeld from AboutEating.com. She's a certified herbalist and a mom and grandma who's been sharing great recipes with us using foods that show up in the Bible. And I'm very much excited about this one because, you know, I like to think and dream about summer and summer foods, but we got a winter tabbouleh recipe. Rita, tabbouleh, I don't know about you, but that's one of those, once the weather warms up and I can finally make and taste tabbouleh, it feels like the spring has sprung and we're in a warm era. So it's got to be kind of weird to think about making tabbouleh in the winter.
Well, you're right. When we were growing up, we only made it in the summer because, seasonal fruits and veggies were in season, like tomatoes and cucumbers and parsley and the herbs. But now you can get just about everything. But here's the thing, Matt. I had a listener who loves tabbouleh, makes it in the summer when she has her own fresh herbs and veggies. But she said she got it from the deli in the winter, and she thought, I wish I could make it myself because, it's expensive, and making it yourself, you get a whole lot more. So we do make it in the winter. We just made it not long ago with my grandkids, so I wanted to share that recipe, and I call it winter tabbouleh or tabbouleh with Bible herbs and veggies.
Yeah, when you look through the recipe of tabbouleh, of course, it's a Middle Eastern dish, which means that it comes from the area where the stuff in the Bible happened, meaning that almost everything in tabbouleh is mentioned in the Bible except for the tomatoes because they weren't discovered until the New World.
Yeah, the cucumbers and onions, we've talked about that. They're in the book of Numbers. The mint, and I call it cumin, those were tithing herbs, Matt. And then wheat, the cracked wheat, the bulgur, we know wheat was a staple in the biblical diet, and it's mentioned, Luke, Matthew, the Psalms. It seems like it's mentioned in a lot of places. So the only thing that you can't sub in here is fresh parsley. You have to use fresh parsley. You cannot use dried. So I'm going to go over the recipe, and then we'll have specifics on my site and yours. How does that sound?
That sounds great. And, you mentioned the fresh parsley is a must. You can find fresh parsley this time of year. It may be a little harder to find fresh versions of some of these other herbs, which I know you're going to sub them out with dried. But let's hear the recipe. Let's hear your modifications.
Yeah, parsley is available, luckily, all year round. Okay, what you're going to do, you're going to place some bulgur cracked wheat, in a bowl, and just rinse it under water a couple times. My mom always did a couple times. And then let it soak about 20 minutes or so, Matt, and then the water will be absorbed. The wheat will be tender, and then you can drain or squeeze it out. So you set that aside. And then what I'll do is I'll put chop up some veggies, and I always have some tomatoes, green onions, the fresh parsley, chopped cucumber, and we call them mangoes, bell peppers. And so you put those all in a bowl. And if you have any radishes, add those too. You stir those together, and then I usually put the wheat in with that. And then here's the dried herbs, cumin, well, I always use that dried. But dried mint and basil, we call the basil hobbit and mint nana. And I usually grow my own fresh and then dry it. So dried mint and basil to taste, and mix all that in. Then we add some salt and pepper, a little bit of vegetable oil, and some lemon juice. And then you stir all that up, and oh my gosh, it's very, very good, so good for you. And we call it winter tabbouleh. And Annie said she could never find the bulgur cracked wheat. And on my site, and maybe we can talk about that, what the difference is between that and regular cracked wheat. So guess what she uses?
What she use? Oh, I know what she uses. She uses quinoa, right?
Yeah, and that's a wonderful sub if you can't do the wheat quinoa because you've still got a very, super healthy meal. So that's our winter tabbouleh. And have you made it like that?
I've not made it like that with the dried, basil and mint. But, really, I mean, it is pretty great when you're chopping that fresh mint and chopping that fresh basil in the spring and summer. It smells amazing. I mean, nothing makes your kitchen smell like summer, like chopping all the stuff for tabbouleh with the lemon and the parsley and the green onions in the mix. But on that bulgur cracked wheat, it's not one of those things you might find in every store. And sometimes you can find it in like the baking section. But I've found better luck going to like a natural food store where they have, the bins, and you like sort of scoop out however much you need on the side, like a not like a Whole Foods. I mean, I guess you can probably find it at like a Whole Foods, but like a farmer co-op stores or some of those other kind of places where you just like you get the scoop and you're like, I'm going to get this much oatmeal in a bag. Right?
Yeah.
Those kind of places I've found the cracked bulgur wheat.
Well, it's interesting because when you said natural, now I've found it at our local grocery store, but only in the organic section. And here's the difference. Bulgur cracked wheat is whole wheat that's been cracked, but it's also been cooked, like parboiled or steamed, then dried and ground into different sizes. And if you see the bulgur cracked wheat, you'll see numbers like 1, 2, 3, and even 4 now. So number 1 is fine, and then it just goes up in coarseness. I usually use number 2 for this, but the thing is, bulgur, you'll see bags marked cracked wheat, but bulgur isn't just regular cracked wheat. It has to say bulgur cracked wheat on the label, because cracked wheat is just whole raw wheat berries cracked into little pieces, not parboiled, dried and ground. So that's the difference. But Teen was a wonderful sub. So don't let that not have you make it if you can't find the cracked wheat, because Teen was everywhere, isn't it?
It's all over the place. By the way, as you're talking about these cracked grains, I'm reminded of one of my favorite winter recipes that you suggested years and years ago, which is your mushroom barley soup.
Oh, my God.
Fantastic. It's a fantastic. If you want to, dial into winter and let's just eat winter soups, that's a good one, mushroom barley soup on your site.
That sounds good. We'll have to share that again.
Indeed. Rita, have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you soon.
I will. Talk to you next week, Matt.
Again, find her in the show notes at sunrisemorningshow.com. 6:30, here's Anna with news.
Good morning. Still no word on confirmed fatalities after a passenger plane collided with a military helicopter and crashed in the Potomac River last night. Audio from an air traffic controller at Reagan National Airport described the collision. Here's Mark Mayfield with more.
The air traffic controller can be heard alerting emergency responders that the airliner and the helicopter both ended up in the Potomac River.
It was probably out in the middle of the river. I just saw a fireball, and then it was just gone.
She goes on to say it appears the jet and the helicopter collided about a half mile from the runway. This was a regional jet operated by American Airlines. The flight was inbound from Wichita, Kansas, when the accident happened near the D.C. area airport. The airline says there were 60 passengers and 4 crew members on board. I'm Mark Mayfield.
There are no flights either into or out of Reagan National Airport this morning as search and rescue operations continue on the Potomac. A ground stop was issued for all flights last night. The president and CEO of the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority said during a press conference last night that the airport would be closed through at least 11 o'clock Eastern time this morning. In other news, President Trump signed a number of executive orders yesterday, including one to prioritize federal funds for expanded school choice programs. The move impacts several departments on a federal level and prioritizes school choice programs through discretionary grants. The order says that within 60 days, the Secretary of Education will provide clarity on how states can use federal formula funds to support K-12 educational choice initiatives. Another executive order yesterday calls for the preparation of a facility at Guantanamo Bay to be used for deported migrants. The order will have the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security prepare a 30,000 migrant facility at the prison site in Cuba. Guantanamo Bay has been used by the U.S. to house military prisoners, including some involved in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The U.S. bishops are welcoming President Trump's executive order this week protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation, which directs the Department of Health and Human Services and other federal agencies to take action to end the practice of medical interventions on children identifying as transgender. Bishop Robert Barron released a statement applauding the executive order, saying, quote, "It is unacceptable that our children are encouraged to undergo destructive medical interventions instead of receiving access to authentic and bodily unitive care," end quote. Pope Francis continued his catechesis series on Christ, our hope, at his general audience yesterday, focusing this time on the life of St. Joseph. From Vatican Radio, Deborah Castellano-Lubov reports.
St. Joseph offers a humble and holy example of how to trust and welcome God's plans for us.
Giuseppe si fida.
The Pope recalled how Joseph's role in the fulfillment of God's saving plan was made known to him in a dream, and how, despite some initial doubts, he, with great faith and trust, responds by taking Mary as his wife and making a home for the incarnate Son of God.
Preferisce farsi guidare dalla sapienza divina.
As Joseph sleeps, the Pope recalled that he hears the words, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary, your wife, into your home, for it is through the Holy Spirit that this child has been conceived in her, and that she will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins." Faced with this revelation, the Holy Father recalled that Joseph does not ask for further proof. Rather, he trusts in God. The Pope remembered how Joseph in all of this does not utter a word, but believes. He does not express himself with idle words, but with concrete deeds. Joseph, the Holy Father remembered, trusts in God and obeys. The Holy Father urged faithful to follow his example, to likewise ask the Lord for the grace to dream and be open to God's dreams.
Giuseppe si fida di Dio.
Finally, Pope Francis concluded by inviting everyone to follow the saint's example of welcoming Christ and his plans for us into our lives. I'm Deborah Castellano-Lubov.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s first confirmation hearing took place yesterday. President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Health and Human Services faced tough questioning about his views on vaccines as well as abortion. He'll be back on Capitol Hill today for another hearing. That's the news. It's 35 past the hour.
The Sunrise Morning Show.
It's always harder to get out of bed when it's cold outside, so give yourself something to look forward to, like Mystic Monk Coffee for the first cup of the day.
You can find a link to Mystic Monk Coffee at our site, sunrisemorningshow.com, and we earn a commission on anything you buy through that link.
You can also treat yourself to a Sunrise Morning Show mug, which you can buy through our online store.
Check out the mugs and link to Mystic Monk Coffee through sunrisemorningshow.com.
That's sunrisemorningshow.com.
What does the church say about original sin? Whatever else one might say about sin, it's the manifestation of a man's use of free will in a way contrary to God's will. Adam and Eve made a choice that was possible only because God permitted it through free will. By their acts, pain and death and misery and every other kind of displeasure would befall the whole human race as sin was brought into the world. But the reality is that the holiness that once was theirs prior to the fall of these first two was also ours by virtue of the parent-child relationship. What they lost, they could not pass on. And so their first sin has placed all of us under a bondage by which Satan seeks to cause us also to abuse the freedom God so lovingly has given each of us. It is only when we willingly choose to abuse that freedom that we take personal responsibility for the effects of original sin. For more information, consult your local pastor or refer to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraphs 388 through 421. For Sacred Heart Radio, this is Deacon Bill Mullaney.
"37 past the hour. I'm Matt Swaim, joined now by Gary Machuda from Hands On Apologetics, and we've been going through his book, Behind the Bible, What the Bible Assumes You Already Know. Gary, good morning.
Morning, Matt.
All right, so we're going to talk about the papacy today, and we're going to talk about the keys to the kingdom. Now, a lot of our listeners may be familiar with this passage from Matthew 16:18. Jesus changes Simon's name to Peter and says, "I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven." Some people might even know that he's hearkening back to Isaiah 22, but there's some other things in this episode that I think we want to get into. So set the stage for us. What does Jesus tell Peter, and what is he echoing when he does so?
Yeah, well, this is one of those verses that people just kind of flip over and don't see the import of. Jesus says to Peter, he changes the name. He says, "I'll give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loosed on earth shall be loosed in heaven." And you have to scratch your head and think, well, what are these keys that are given to Peter, right? And like you mentioned, if you search the Old Testament, you'll actually find that the keys were a sign of office known as the Grand Vizier, or we would say the Prime Minister of the kingdom. And so you'd actually have a physical key on them. And the text you go to for that is Isaiah 22. Now, what's really cool about this is that Isaiah is talking about this wicked servant that was a prime minister of David's kingdom. And he says, his name is Shebna. And he says that, Shebna, you're going to be kicked out of your office, and you're going to be replaced by a righteous servant named Eliakim, son of Hilkiah. And it says, on that day, I will summon my servant Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, and I'll clothe him with your robe. I'll gird him with your sash. I'll give over to him your authority, and he'll be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and the house of Judah. And I will place the key of the house of David on his shoulder. When he opens, none shall shut, and when he shuts, none shall open. So you can see there that the sign of the office of prime minister is this key that's placed on his shoulder.
And again, this comes back to this question that some people will say, well, who's in charge of the church? Well, the Pope's in charge of the church. Well, that's true. But who's really in charge of the church? The guy who appointed the office of the papacy, namely Jesus Christ. And this is where we get into these overlapping images where, yes, of course, the Pope's in charge of the church as far as, the acting, insofar as he is acting in the authority that Christ has given him. I mean, it all kind of comes back to Christ.
Yeah, and that always confused me before I got into defending the faith or apologetics. What exactly is the relationship of authority? Because Christ is the head of the church, yet the Pope is. But the keys actually provide the key to understanding that. In all ancient monarchies in the Middle East, you have the king, who is the macro manager of the kingdom. He's the one that decides whether or not to go to war, whether or not to have treaties, the big picture stuff. But, the king couldn't be bothered with whether or not there was enough hummus in the commissary, or, whether somebody needs a job or somebody needs to be replaced. The daily grind of the kingdom, the micromanagement of the kingdom, that devolved to the ministers over whom there was a prime minister. So in a sense, the king's in charge of the macro management of the kingdom. The prime minister is in charge of the micromanagement, the day-to-day affairs of the kingdom. And that really opened the door for me, because now I understood, if Jesus is making Peter prime minister of the kingdom, then he has the authority of the daily management of the kingdom. But Christ is still the micromanager, including, of course, he is the head of the prime minister.
Yeah. Okay, so what we've built here, pun intended, is a picture of not just a kingdom, but a city, right? We've built a picture of like a kind of a place, and there are a lot of things that one might think, in regard to this. Well, what does it mean to have a church built on top of Peter, right? And for him to have the key to get in and out of it, right? There's a lot to this.
Yeah.
And what it also brings up, and I don't know if you intended to discuss this today, but I couldn't help but think of it as I was prepping for this segment, that just as we have this conversation about, well, who's in charge of the church? Is it the Pope or Jesus? You can have a similar conversation about, what is the church founded upon? Is it founded upon the apostles, or is it founded upon Jesus? Because Paul says in 1 Corinthians 3 that no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. But Paul also says in Ephesians 2:20 that you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and the members of God's household, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ as the cornerstone. So Jesus is the foundation, according to Paul. But according to Paul, the apostles are also the foundation of this building, that's this city.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a really good point. In fact, you could do that with all sorts of different titles. For example, Jesus is the good shepherd, right? He's the one shepherd who's going to shepherd a flock of God. But we also learn in the New Testament that the apostles are shepherds. And in fact, Peter himself calls Jesus the chief shepherd, right? And so I think that kind of provides a key for this, is that what makes the apostles true shepherds is because they share in the shepherdhood, if you want to say, of Jesus. The same things with the authority of the church, or even the foundation of the church. Jesus is the rock, but also the apostle, or Peter is the rock, because in a sense he shares in that authority of Jesus. And the same thing's true with the prime minister. The prime minister has no authority whatsoever in himself. Rather, his authority comes from the king who makes him the prime minister. In fact, that's what's so cool about Matthew 16 and the giving of the keys. It really highlights the fact that Jesus is the true king of Israel, the true Messianic king, and he shows that by appointing a prime minister.
Yeah. I'm thinking of other images as we're talking about foundations and keys and buildings and cities. When you hear the story about the New Jerusalem in Revelation 21, and it's, got these 12 foundations to the city, and what's written on the 12 foundations, among other things, it's the names of the apostles.
Yeah,
right? And the apostles of the Lamb. So why is it that their names are on there? Because they are in service to Christ. Right? That's the connection. It's not because they have certain sorts of achievements. It's because they were appointed directly by Christ as apostles. And it kind of goes back to this whole question about, how does Peter have this authority? Not of himself, because it was given to him, right? And only the king can give out orders and offices like that.
Right. And also notice that by giving the keys of the kingdom, it shows succession, right? It's not like there was a prime minister. Once the prime minister dies, then we reorder the kingdom to be a democracy or something like that. No, when Shebna's kicked out, Eliakim takes his place, right? So you have succession. Same thing's true with Peter. When Peter dies, then another takes his office, which historically we understand to be St. Linus.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And just this one little verse that we hear all the time, Matthew 16:18, where Jesus calls Peter the rock and gives him the keys. But if people want to find more of what you're up to at Hands-On Apologetics and get your book Behind the Bible, What the Bible Assumes You Already Know, Gary Machuda, how do they do so?
Sure. Just go to www.handsonapologetics.com.
Linked at sunrisemorningshow.com in the show notes. Enter your email and subscribe while you're there. Gary, thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too, Matt.
14 till, back after this.
Are you paying high prices with traditional health insurance that pays for things that violate your conscience? There is an alternative. Solidarity Health Share, a Sunrise Morning Show underwriter, is a community of faithful individuals and families that never share into immoral medical services. Solidarity is not insurance. It's a not-for-profit medical cost-sharing ministry. They offer an alternative way to fund your medical expenses that's ethical, affordable, and more comprehensive. As a member, you choose the doctors you want to see by presenting your Solidarity member ID card. Solidarity allows you to remain faithful to Roman Catholic teachings, and you will never share into immoral medical procedures like abortion, sterilization, or contraception. Memberships start as low as $85 per month for singles and $512 for families. To learn more, 844-313-4999. That's 844-313-4999 or solidarityhealthshare.org.
If the cold winter mornings make you want to stay in bed, it's time to get some Mystic Monk coffee or tea to help make kicking off the covers a little easier.
And when you head to their site by clicking the link at sunrisemorningshow.com, you earn us a commission on your purchase without spending anything extra.
While you're at our site, be sure to check out our online store where you can buy Sunrise Morning Show mugs and travel mugs.
Get a mug and link to Mystic Monk Coffee at sunrisemorningshow.com.
That's sunrisemorningshow.com.
One of the reasons we should go to Mass is because it is the food of the saints that we receive. And for the saints, they understood rightly that the time after Holy Communion, that those moments are the most precious moments of our lives.
The Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, live from the EWTN Chapel, every morning, 8 Eastern, on EWTN Radio and Television.
12 till, here's Anna with headlines.
A midair collision in Washington, D.C. took place last night. There's no word on confirmed fatalities. The collision between a passenger plane and a military Black Hawk helicopter. President Trump signed a number of executive orders yesterday. One calls for the preparation of a facility at Guantanamo Bay to be used for deported migrants. Another of them prioritizes federal funds for expanded school choice programs. You can hear news at the top and bottom of each hour right here on the Sunrise Morning Show. Back with us now on the Sunrise Morning Show is Courtney Brown, Executive Director of the Ruah Woods Institute. They offer K through 12 theology of the body curriculum for schools. Check it out at ruahwoodsinstitute.org. Good morning, Courtney.
Good morning, Annie. How are you?
I am doing fine, and we are going to be talking today about what John Paul II called original solitude in the theology of the body. What is original solitude?
So to answer that pretty quickly, original solitude is one of the first experiences that man experienced in the garden, where Adam, and the word Adam meaning first human being, was experiencing who he was in relation to the world and who he was in relation to God. And that our body actually being made, having a human existence and a material existence, meaning that our body actually showed and revealed to us how we are to relate into this world and how we are like God by, as we even walk around and thinking about experiences or whatnot, trying to find and understand meaning. So this idea of our ability to wonder and the capacity to be able to reflect, all that was man's first original experience in the garden. And in some of JP2's reflections, not some, but a huge part of it actually, he refers to an original echo, referring to the three original experiences of solitude, unity, and original nakedness. But in this original echo, there's actually a double meaning in the word original here. Obviously, we know the meaning of original is to be the first, right? The original this or the original that. But the other meaning is more of a foundational meaning, in a sense that for John Paul II, these original experiences are foundational experiences which are always there. So, for example, in original solitude, what that really speaks to is our connectedness with God. And that our first experience was always a connection with Him into this world. Now, obviously, being made in the image and likeness of God, when we think of being in communion with another, we were made for that. So Adam comes to recognize, and so does Eve, that they're like God in the moment of communion too. But we also have to remember that the first foundational experience of even understanding that is knowing our connectedness with God Himself.
Well, yeah, I mean, this makes sense because
we are, I mean, as you say, we're made in his image and after his likeness, and God is a communion of persons, but we are made to be in communion with God.
That's exactly right. So the whole first principle is the word love, right? So we all know that to be as will as give the other. But essentially, this whole existence that we have is gratuitous, like it's given to us. So we are created in givenness. And it's a really important distinction to really kind of, in your own personal prayer life and reflection, is that the idea that this whole thing that you find yourself in this world is all gift. And it's a gift means that essentially it's a relationship. So in givenness, we were given in relation to God right out of the gate. So right out of the gate, solitude does not mean I'm a lonely person, that I'm alone or I'm depressed. But Adam wasn't depressed walking in the garden. And it wasn't even a sense when we say there was a certain type of lack. It's more of an ache. It was more that he was meant to even experience something even higher in understanding the image of God, not so much in retrospect that he didn't have anything, but the ache was more for something deeper. And even that deeper communion, that marital embrace, actually points us to something even deeper, what we will have with God in heaven. And there's a bishop, a contemporary of JP2 in Poland, that has a reflection on original solitude, and he makes a connection with being silent and the idea of how silence, our interior life, is actually an experience in that foundational original solitude. So yes, sin disfigured, in a certain respect, brought discord into our understanding of our relationship with God. So it's been, in a lot of ways, we know this, that sin has distained it, but through baptism, becoming his son, and through sanctifying grace, every time we go to confession, these things, this gift of God brought back to us is a restoration into that. So we're never we don't lose this capacity to be able to be in connectedness with God. So as we journey through the spiritual life, and even with our kids, even how when we talk to the students, that putting them in these moments of stillness are really, really important for not just their mental health, because we have all that stuff that's thrown in there too, because why wouldn't it? But also in their relationship with God as they grow, right, and become adults and mature adults. We want them to grow in their faith. So a lot of stillness and solitude, in the sense of giving them time to really be an encounter with God, is utmost important, and trying to figure out ways to do that. It's a task, it's a toil, but as Ratzinger calls, one of the best ways we can combat that, as Ratzinger points out, is Satan is the great in-between. So just think how subtle that is. And what are the things that come in between kids being my kids too, but even ourselves? What comes in between? What are our distractions that we find ourselves in prayer?
This
and we have to give those over.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a great thing to first explain to a group of children, of teenagers, of preteens, or whatever. Like, say what you just said, and then put them in front of the Blessed Sacrament. Like, take away even we who are speaking to our kids can kind of get in the way of things, right? Like, we should have the faith to just put them in front of Jesus.
Yes, that's exactly right. And it doesn't have to be just like, here's Jesus, and here's Jesus, and this is, go right ahead, do what you need to do. The best thing to do is actually put them in front of them, in front of Jesus, but giving them the capacities like Lectio Divina, learning how to take something and reflecting on the experience. And what I mean by that, let me just step back for a second with that, is one of the atrophies that our culture, just because of how fast-paced we are, how distracted we are, the amount of noise, ourselves included, is the capacity to take an experience and reflect on the meaning behind it. So we need to help our kids, not just our small kids, but like our older kids. Like, you need to spend time thinking about this, what's its meaning, and then walking them through it, and become that kind of, like, as I've said before, kind of that midwife approach, like walking them with prayer and just continuing to encourage them to do that. So
I love it. We've been talking to Courtney Brown, and you can find the Theology of the Body curriculum through ruawoodsinstitute.org. Courtney, really appreciate the thoughts this morning. Thank you so much.
No problem. God bless.
You too. Thank you. All right, that'll do it for this national edition of the Sunrise Morning Show. We'll look forward to talking to you again tomorrow, EWTN. May God bless you and keep you and grant you his peace.